Hi, my name's Crystal, and my family are super wealthy. I have never needed to work, but I wanted to. So, me and my friend Alice decided to become entrepreneurs, and my dad helped fund our startup. We both love shopping. So, we created a really cool app that helps you choose the latest trends to suit your body. And unlike my friends, I was single, but I didn't mind. In fact, I loved how free I felt. However, there was just one small problem. My parents weren't okay with this. They were desperate for me to find someone and get married, and that's when they decided to take matters into their own hands. They started setting me up on blind dates. I told them I could easily find my own date, but they said that whoever I dated had to come from a good, wealthy family. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't even interested in dating, especially as I'd had some really bad relationships in college. That's also why my parents wanted to find someone for me, as they'd hated the guys I'd dated before and didn't trust me that I wouldn't make the same mistakes again. I refused to go, but then my dad said something that sent chills up my spine. Okay, don't go. But then your startup is over. I'll take away all your funding. Wait, no, that couldn't happen. We'd worked so hard to build the app, and the only way we could afford it was with my dad's help. Fine, I'll go, but I can't promise I'll like these guys, I said. I went on the date, and then many more after that, and I quickly became an expert at making sure those boys wouldn't be interested in me. And yet still, I was keeping my parents happy by going on the dates. It was a win-win. But before I became a pro at this blind date game, there were many awkward and hilarious situations that I had to go through. On one of my first dates, we met up in the lounge of a hotel. All I knew was that the guy Trent owned the hotel and that his family were a big name in some hotel chains in the area. I was running late, and the parking lot in the basement was jam-packed. I finally managed to find an empty spot, and I was rushing to get to it. But then out of nowhere, another car also appeared and was heading for the same spot. We ended up bumping into each other. Both our cars got badly scratched, and mine even had a dent. Oh no, my baby. I was so upset. This was my Porsche that my parents had bought me for my sweet 16th. And even though I have a ton of other cars at home, this was my most favorite. Who would dare to hurt my child like this? I stomped out of the car and started yelling at the guy. He climbed out of his car and he was wearing a hat, so I couldn't really see his face, but I guessed he was younger than me. Could he be the valet parking boy or something? But then he started speaking and said that it was my fault because I'd been going in the wrong direction, and that he had every right to make me pay for the damage done to his car. What? He's the one who should have been paying for the damage on my car. Well, that just made me even more furious. And then he had the cheek to say he was in a rush, and he handed me his business card and said we'd settle this later. I snatched that card out of his hand and threw it in my bag without even looking. That would be my lawyer's problem, not mine. And to make matters worse, he had taken the parking spot. So now I still had to find somewhere else to park. It took me ages. And by then, I figured my date wouldn't have even waited for me. I arrived at the table that had been reserved for us, and of course, he was already sitting there. From afar, I was impressed. He looked like a total babe. Maybe my parents' taste wasn't so bad after all. And his outfit was on point. In fact, I'd seen it somewhere before. Must have been a new trend. I said hi to him and sat down, but he just started laughing. And after like 1 minute of smiling at me, he said hi back. Then he started to introduce himself, and I realized who he was. He was the guy I just bumped into in the parking lot. Oh my god, this couldn't be happening. This was too awkward. I pretended to look for something in my bag and then quickly glanced at his name card. Yep, it said General Manager on it. Oh man, I was doomed. I tried my best to act like nothing had happened. I mean, maybe he didn't recognize me. Ugh, who am I kidding? Of course he did. And as the date went on, he kept teasing me about it, saying that the parking spot was reserved for hotel staff. I was kind of bummed. I mean, he was so cute, and I'd completely ruined my chances. I felt bad for creating such a bad impression and begged him not to tell my parents. He agreed that it would be our little secret, and after that, things were better. We actually got really close and even became good friends. You're probably wondering why we didn't hit it off. Well, turns out he's actually gay. He trusted me enough to come out to me. That's how close we were. He hadn't even told his parents yet. And that's why these blind dates are as much of a nuisance for him as they are for me. So, he's the one who helped me come up with the idea to act like a bad girl, to turn off the other guys on dates. All based on his actual experience of our date. Ever since then, whenever I went on a blind date, I was intentionally late so that I'd make the worst impression possible. I'd wear my bad girl outfit, which was an oversized black shirt, ripped jeans, and dirty sneakers. And of course, I'd always chew gum. Make sure to have this annoyed look on my face all the time. This drove rich guys crazy, and none of them ever asked for a second date with me. But one time, it didn't go to plan. The guy I was on a date with, Corey, he saw right through me and even had the guts to confront me about what I was trying to do. It made me so mad, and it was the worst date ever. But still, he told his parents that it went well, and he wanted to see me again. He surely wanted to pick a fight with me. Since he was the only guy that I'd been on a blind date with that had given positive feedback, my parents were super stoked upon hearing this, and they made me continue seeing him. Otherwise, they said they'd take away my cars and cancel my credit cards. I couldn't stand him. He was your typical bad boy player type who thought he owned the world. He didn't even work. His dad just made up a position for him in the family business. What a spoiled brat. And we didn't even actually date. He just rang me up anytime he wanted and made me go to places with him, as if I was just an accessory to him. It's such a waste of time, but what else could I do? One day, we were at the country club to celebrate his dad's 60th. It was so boring, so I snuck outside for a bit. He caught me playing on my phone, and he literally snatched it out of my hand and teased me with it. He thought it was hilarious until he realized that I'd been texting with Trent. Suddenly, he looked really distant. Then he asked if I was close to this guy. I didn't even have a chance to respond. He quickly returned my phone and just left me standing there. I didn't get it. Was he jealous or something? After that, he disappeared for a few weeks, which was really odd because normally he was all up in my face all the time. My parents were worried, and they forced me to go check to see if he was okay. Why is he so bothersome? I didn't want to go at all, but still, I had to. I got to his apartment, and the whole place smelled like alcohol. I mumbled in annoyance, "Hey, are you an alcoholic or something? I thought you'd maybe been sick, but okay then. I see." Then he said, "This is all because of you." I was confused. What had I done? I was about to leave when I noticed something. It was a crumpled photo of Trent and Corey. Oh my God. Am I seeing things or what? I picked it up. Corey glanced over and sighed. After a really awkward silence, Corey told me that Trent was his ex. What? So Corey was gay too? They broke up because they had planned to run away together because neither of them were brave enough to come out to their parents. But then Corey had bailed on the plan when his dad had offered him a position in the company and a huge inheritance. He couldn't give that up. Trent had been so hurt because Corey had chosen money over their relationship. It's been 2 years since then, and Corey regrets it a lot, but Trent won't even give him the time of day anymore. That's when Corey asked me to help him speak to Trent again. Oh God, I don't know if I should do it because I don't want Trent to date such a bad guy again. Plus, maybe Trent will just think I'm taking Corey's side and cut me out of his life too. But what if Corey really has changed? So, in the first part of my story, my parents set me up on some blind dates. First, there was Trent, who ended up being gay, so that didn't work out. And then I met Corey, who wasn't far from being called my worst enemy. We hated each other, but still, he made me go on dates with him. And then it turned out he was also gay, and that Trent was actually his ex. Corey begged me to help him get Trent back. So let's see how Trent will react to this. I decided to casually ask Trent about his past relationships and stuff, to see if he'd bring Corey up. He said he'd been so badly betrayed by his ex and that he still hadn't forgiven him for it. Clearly, he was talking about Corey. I didn't know what to do. It was killing me to see how miserable they both were. Seeing how Corey desperately wanted Trent back made me realize that he had changed. If he was given one more chance, he would never risk losing Trent a second time. So I decided to help them get back together. I told Corey about it first, and I have never seen him look so happy. And after that, we started getting on pretty well, because we didn't have to pretend to be dating anymore. We could just be ourselves. And guess what? He's not actually that bad. In fact, he was just like me, having to put up with his parents setting him up on stupid dates. He even told my parents that I was such an amazing girl. And after that, my parents started to respect me more. The only thing was, I couldn't let Trent know about my plan. In fact, Trent didn't even know that Corey and I knew each other. But from the way Trent spoke about Corey, I knew he still had feelings for him too. So all I had to do was set up a date for them and let fate handle the rest. I asked Trent to meet me for dinner and arranged with Corey to secretly show up later. But as soon as Trent saw Corey, his face went bright red, and within a second flat, he was furious. He stood up and started yelling at us both and even pushed Corey out of the way as he stormed out. Every single person in the restaurant was staring at us, and I even heard some old couple whispering that I was clearly two-timing these guys, and I'd just been caught, and how embarrassing that was. Trent was really mad at me after that, so I had to try and get him to forgive me, and at the same time, try and persuade him to give it another go with Corey. I knew that Trent had a sweet tooth, so I started making cupcakes and cookies and leaving them on his doorstep. He never answered the door no matter how many times I knocked, and one time I left a 3-tiered chocolate cake at his door, and I overheard his neighbors talking. One of them said, "Oh, when will she stop? What a desperate gold digger." And then the other looked at me and started shaking her head. She said, "She clearly has no dignity. What kind of girl chases a boy like that?" I was so embarrassed. I realized how needy I must have looked, so I ran back to my car, but before I got in, Trent came running after me. He had heard the neighbors too, and he'd realized how hard I'd been trying. He said to me, "Crystal, stop it already. You keep trying to fix things that were never your fault to begin with." Well, at least he'd spoken to me again. I told him I was sorry, and I just missed hanging out with him. So he said he forgave me, but there was one more thing he wanted. I replied to him with the biggest smile on my face. "Sure, anything for you, Trent. I'm all yours for today." "Okay then, let's go to the theme park. It's been a while, and I need something to relieve all this stress," he said. I'm pretty sure I started to sweat a little upon hearing that because I'm literally petrified of heights. So we went there and went on all the rides that Trent wanted to, and I had to close my eyes the whole time and spent most of the day clinging onto him out of fear. But Trent seemed to have a great time, and I was just glad to make him happy again. That was all that mattered. After that day, I was able to bring up Corey again, and I told him that he didn't have to take him back, but maybe he could just open his heart a little and give Corey a chance to explain himself. He reluctantly agreed, just so that I'd stop going on and on about it. And he did give him a chance. Well, not really a chance, but he did keep the gifts Corey sent instead of sending them right back. And he stopped blocking his number. They even started talking again. Anytime Trent replied to Corey, Corey would call me and tell me, and he'd be so excited. And they even met up to have a serious chat about what had happened. Now there's no more bad blood between them, and all that was left to do was for Corey to make a move to win Trent back. Corey started to shower Trent in love. He even bought him an annual pass to the theme park and backstage passes to his favorite singer. But still, Trent wouldn't budge. He was being nice to Corey, but he didn't seem to want to date him again, which was so weird. What was going on? Had Trent met another guy already? One day, I met up with Trent to talk over a drink. I jokingly asked him, "Hey, are you seeing another guy? What about Corey? I mean, I know he hurt you in the past, but he's changed now. And honestly, you two were miserable before. Now that he's back in your life, you seem so much happier." I waited for him to reply, but he just stared at me, which was really weird and it made me blush. Had I just stepped out of line? I said to him, "Well then, come on, spill the beans. Who is he?" Then he smirked and downed his drink, and he said, "The reason I'm so much happier is because, yes, I have met someone." "I knew it!" I interrupted. Then I realized he wasn't finished speaking. He continued, "But it's not a guy. It's a girl. And she's the reason why I can't be with Corey again. She made me realize that I'm actually bisexual." And I was surprised. I mean, I really loved Corey. So this girl kind of came out of nowhere and has blown me away with how incredible she is. I couldn't believe it. "Oh my God, who is she?" I said, laughing. And then he went bright red and said, "Crystal, come on. It's you. Duh." What? I was too shocked to even reply. My heart was beating so fast. Trent liked me? Honestly, I was so confused. I mean, Trent was gay. Why would he like me? I felt so awkward and I could feel his eyes on me. I knew he was waiting for me to say something. I looked up for a second and our eyes met, and the tension in the air was so intense. I just couldn't stand it. I made up an excuse, saying I felt tired and that I needed to go home. Trent looked a bit upset, but still offered to drive me home. I turned him down, though, and said I'd take an Uber. I just needed some alone time. I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. It actually made sense. We had so much fun together, but because I'd known he was gay, I'd never really looked at him as boyfriend material. But what if he wasn't gay? I mean, could we be together? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I liked him too. But I had to forget about those feelings because what about Corey? I couldn't just steal the love of his life like that. He'd be heartbroken. I didn't sleep a wink that night. All kinds of questions constantly popped up in my head. The next day, Trent texted me first, asking, "Did you sleep well last night? I hope what I said last night didn't keep you up all night," with a smiley face. I replied, "Actually, I was awake the whole night. I've thought a lot about my feelings, but Trent, I don't want to hurt Corey. We can't do this." He then replied, "Don't think too much. That doesn't matter. Just answer this one question. Do you have feelings for me? Just say yes or no." I don't know what was going through my mind, but at that moment, I guess I was just tired of things being so complicated. So I typed yes, then hit send. Okay, so now Trent knew I had feelings for him too, and he sounded so happy. He said I shouldn't worry and that we could work this out as long as our feelings were mutual. A few days later, Trent said he'd meet up with Corey to talk to him. I was way too anxious to ask Trent how it went, but then at midnight, Corey called me. I was terrified to answer. I knew he would yell at me, but to my complete surprise, he didn't. He sounded calm and said Trent had told him everything and that if I truly had feelings for him, I should go for it. He said, "I've spent years away from the one I love, and I don't want the same thing to happen to you and Trent. It's too painful. You both deserve to be happy. Plus, you helped me so much. Thanks to you, I managed to clear things up with Trent, and just having him back in my life, even as a friend, is good enough for me. I'll find someone else, and it'll make me so happy to know you two are happy." I was so touched by what he said, I couldn't even respond. I just started crying and told him he'd definitely meet someone amazing soon. Even he sounded choked up, but he tried to hide it by laughing and calling me a crybaby. Now that I had his support, I decided to give it a go with Trent. We went on a date, and it was so fun. Seeing as it wasn't our first time hanging out, we were so comfortable around each other. And now that I knew he was interested in me, I noticed how much he gave me butterflies. It was amazing. Now we're officially a couple. Turns out my parents are pretty good at playing Cupid, right?
Hey, I'm Amy. I'm 23, and I've been besties with my neighbor Drew for years. But I've never thought of sabotaging his wedding, ever. Heck, I thought I'd be the one marrying him. Well, I mean, if no one better came along. Drew's 2 years older than me, but back then, I wasn't your regular girly girl. Instead, I much preferred hanging out with the boys and playing basketball, so we quickly became best friends. But when I hit puberty, how I looked began to matter more to me. So I started making efforts and behaved more like a lady, result being that guys started noticing me, Drew included. One time back in high school, Drew asked me out, but I just laughed it off and told him to stop kidding. In other words, I rejected him. It was good to know that I had him as a backup, but right then and there, I didn't want to date him. Why would I, when I could have any boy in the school? After that, he pretty much did anything I asked, treated me like a princess, and followed me everywhere I went. Heck, we were so close that it was an in-joke with my family that we would end up together. When I went to study in Europe for 3 years, Drew was still there for me when I went through tough times, or even breakups. Being in a different country meant that Drew and I didn't talk as much as we used to, but I knew that if I needed him, then all I needed to do was click my fingers and he'd appear. Whenever I came back home for the holidays, he was always there at the airport waiting to pick me up. So when I finished my studies and arrived home for good, I expected him to be there to pick me up with a large bunch of flowers in hand. But no, he didn't show up. It was only my parents waiting for me. On the journey home, I sat there sulking. Drew had majorly annoyed me. How dare he stand me up? Sensing my mood, Mom asked, "Sweetie, what's up? Aren't you happy to be back?" I muttered out, "Yeah, I just don't appreciate Drew not picking me up." Mom casually said, "Oh, right. Although, I suppose planning the wedding is keeping him busy. I'm sure he just forgot." I sat upright in my seat. "What? Wedding? Whose wedding?" My mom then acted surprised. "He didn't tell you?" "Oh, how busy the groom-to-be must be." "Honey, it's Drew's wedding." This uneasy feeling washed over me. I felt like I'd been cheated on. Okay, so I didn't love him, but that's not the point. How dare some girl come along and steal him away from me? I arrived home to see Drew pacing the curb. He spotted me and gave me an excited wave. I stormed over to him and shouted out, "Why didn't you tell me you're getting married?" He smiled and then replied, "I'm sorry, Amy. I just wanted to do it in person as I have an important question to ask you." He sounded so serious. Then he reached into his pocket. OMG. Was he going to propose to me? Has this all been a prank leading to this moment? But no, he pulled out a packet of mints and offered me one. At that moment, a girl walked out of his house and passed him a coffee. He wrapped his arms around her waist and kissed the top of her head. Yuck. "Amy, you remember Emily, right? She was in your year at school. She's my fiancé. We'd like to ask you to be our bridesmaid." Emily added, "Actually, he wanted you to be his best man, since we all know how close you guys are, but that would look a little strange, don't you think?" I just stood there speechless with my mouth wide open. No, I didn't remember this Emily girl from school, and I didn't want to be her stupid bridesmaid. Drew joked, "Aren't you happy for me? I know you'll love this. That's why I waited till now to tell you, to be able to see your over-the-top reaction." I had no reaction. I literally couldn't find any words to say and just stood there motionless as the realization that the guy I could always count on was now someone else's, and I was meant to help them out with their lame wedding. I tried being happy for them, but they just made me feel so sick. Now whenever I wanted to see Drew, there's Emily tagging along, and they always talk to each other in this annoying high-pitched voice, not to mention the kissing and hugging every 5 seconds. I couldn't stand seeing their PDA for another moment, so I decided to pull some mischievous pranks. First, I kept asking Emily to eat fast foods with me, which I told her that I extremely craved for since I'd been abroad for so long. But the real reason was just that I wanted her to gain weight quickly and be unable to fit into her wedding dress. And I succeeded. When the 3 of us visited the wedding shop, whichever dress that Emily liked to try, she couldn't fit in. So the only one that fitted her looked very old-fashioned and ugly. Seeing her sulky face, I was so happy inside. Until Drew ran towards her and comforted her. He praised her as the most beautiful woman in the world, no matter what she wore. And he was very lucky to marry her. Ugh, I want to puke for real. A few days later, Emily held her bachelorette party. As the party venue was close to my house, Emily and her friends decided to come over to prepare themselves before the party. Though I found it bothersome at first, then I realized that it's a good opportunity for another prank. That afternoon, when they were all busy putting on makeup and getting dressed, I offered to help Emily iron her dress as I was ironing mine. She agreed and handed me the dress. I secretly turned up the iron's temperature, and it burnt her silk dress in a blink. I screamed and acted like it was an accident. Emily and her friends immediately rushed over. They were shocked to see the dress was totally ruined. I apologized frantically as tears started to well up in Emily's eyes. "Are you sure you didn't do it on purpose?" a friend of Emily asked me. Then everyone gave me a dirty look. "No, don't say that. Amy's just trying to help me," Emily said through tears. Jeez, why did she have to be so nice? After that, she called Drew, cried desperately, and told him everything. And just half an hour later, Drew showed up and handed Emily a brand new dress, which is even prettier than the old one. Emily hugged Drew, kissed him on the cheek, and went on and on about how he's the best. Yuck. Suddenly, some of Emily's friends whispered something like, "Emily is so lucky to have a fiancé like Drew." Unlike Carl, he is really useless. So Carl was Emily's ex, right? I wondered if he also wanted to break this wedding like me. So I did some digging online and easily found Carl. Then I messaged him, telling him I was Emily's bridesmaid and I had something super urgent to tell him about her. He agreed to meet me at a bar downtown. First impression, this guy's actually kinda cute. Turns out, goody two-shoes Emily has good taste in guys. As I sat down next to him, I noticed that Carl had been drinking a lot. But I didn't think much of it at the time. I gave my best convincing look and told him, "Emily still has feelings for you. She's now having cold feet about the wedding." At first, he didn't say much. He just kept on drinking. But suddenly, he stood up and slurred out how he needed to confess his love to her. Right now! So I followed him to her house. That night, the bridesmaids were having a sleepover at Emily's to help her prepare the guest list for the wedding and stuff. I quickly came in and made up some excuse for showing up late. And that's when we all heard something noisy coming from outside. Everyone ran to the porch to check out Carl begin to drunkenly slur out something like, "I will always love you," and such. Emily looked shocked and tried persuading Carl to go home. I watched on with a secret smirk as he threw up in her pot plant, accused the other bridesmaids of being traitors, and tripped over the cat as he tried to enter her house. Carl eventually passed out on the couch, and Emily, being Emily, placed a blanket over him. She didn't even look angry. Why? I couldn't understand why I had done so many things, but she could be so calm and overcame everything. The next day, when Carl woke up, they talked, and I was terrified Carl would tell Emily about my involvement. But instead, he apologized to her, wished her the best for the future, then left. A few days later, Carl asked me to meet him at a coffee shop. He asked me why I lied to him, as Emily said she was very blissful to marry Drew. I sighed and told him the truth. I also said that I didn't have feelings for Drew, I just hated to see the two of them together. Then Carl said, "Don't let jealousy get the best of you. Listen to me, Amy. What we need to do now is restore our life and leave the past behind." I felt down upon hearing his words, but I knew Carl was right. Despite Drew having been my best friend since childhood, it was the moment he needed to have a life of his own. "Don't be so sad," Carl said, patting my hand gently. I looked up and was fascinated by not only Carl's look, but also his maturity and sensitivity. The wedding day came. I stood next to Drew and Emily as they exchanged their rings to take a vow to be husband and wife. Somehow, I felt so proud that my best friend found his life partner. But still, I felt a little uneasy inside, until I spotted Carl in the crowd. He walked over, gave me a bright smile, and joked that he was going to spend the rest of the day here so I couldn't cause any more havoc. I laughed out loud and responded, it was more about him than me that would be causing trouble in the wedding. After the ceremony, we spent time together walking through the park and went to an arcade. I have to admit that it was kind of fun and took my mind off things. Since then, something weird happened. I've found myself thinking about Carl a lot. Like, a lot. Am I developing feelings for him? Maybe now is the time for me to find my life partner too. And I think I've found a great candidate. In high school, there are always those mean girls, right? Well, turns out I was actually the mean girl, and it took something really awful for me to realize it. You see, I'm a pretty average kind of girl. Average looking, average grades, and I guess you could say I'm a little chubby. Yeah, I'm that invisible. But thank God, I had some good friends, so it's okay. I'm content with my mediocre life. But one day, I received a note in my locker. There's even a heart on it. My heart started beating so fast. Could it be? I read on and couldn't believe it. It was from a guy called Dave, and he was confessing his feelings for me. He even left his phone number. I was stunned. And then I got to the bottom of the note, and reality hit me smack bang in the face. "I'll be waiting for your call, Sarah." It wasn't for me. It was for Sarah. Of course it was for Sarah. All the boys fancied her. And who wouldn't? She was the prettiest girl in school. Plus her locker was right next to mine. So he just made a mistake. I was about to pop it in her locker when I saw her walking towards me. I tried to hide my disappointment that the note hadn't been for me. It drove me crazy to see her bouncing towards me with her blonde, curly hair and gorgeous smile. When she saw me, she started making small talk and even complimented me on my cardigan. It was so weird. What's so good about that to talk about? Was that compliment a kind of sarcasm or something? This angelic girl always gave me uneasy feelings. I bet she's that type of mean girl that's just being nice to your face, then later comes home and puts your name in her burn book. After she walked away, I scrunched up the note and threw it in my bag. Later that night, I did something insane. I texted Dave, pretending to be Sarah. I don't know why I did it, but after a few texts back and forth, it actually became quite fun. I looked him up on social media, and I couldn't believe how handsome he was. He was a year older, and so his classes were in another building. No wonder I hadn't noticed him before. Even our cafeterias were in different buildings, so he'd probably never seen me either. Not that he would notice me anyway, though. I felt so wild messaging him. I'd never done anything like this before, and it actually felt quite fun to pretend to be Sarah. I could just talk to him so freely and didn't have to overthink if I was sounding like a loser. Because in those moments, I was Sarah, the most popular girl in school, and it felt amazing. It didn't matter what I said, because I knew that David thought I was Sarah, and so everything I said to him was funny or cute. I even told my best friend Clara what I was doing, and she was amazed that I had the courage to do such a thing. I showed her our texts, and she was like, "Wow, girl, you are crazy." I continued to text him, though, and eventually, I found I couldn't stop. I didn't know how long I could keep it up before I got caught, but I figured I'd get bored before then anyway. But then one day, he asked me to meet him after school, and I froze. Obviously, I couldn't meet him, nor let him approach the real Sarah in real life. So I made up some excuse about how my parents were super strict, and I'd get in trouble if anyone saw us. But he insisted, saying he had a gift for me. So I told him to leave it on top of the vending machine for me instead. To my surprise, he thought this was a really romantic idea, and so he agreed. Throughout the next week, he left me a gift every day. One day, it was a small crystal in the shape of a rose. The next day, it was a book of poetry. That was sweet. I didn't expect such delicacy from a jock. And then he asked me to meet him at the basketball game that Friday. He sounded so serious. I guess his patience had run out. Well, of course, it would be too absurd to go to the same school, but didn't see each other at all for 2 weeks straight, right? I had no other choice but to agree. But then, the panic kicked in. It was the finale of a big tournament at school, so everyone was going. And Sarah will be there too. And if Dave saw her, no, it would just be a disaster. My life would be over if they knew what I'd been up to. I asked Clara what I should do, and she was like, "What? You haven't ended that catfishing thing yet? You need to tell him now, before it's too late." She'd called me a catfish. I was so offended, so I just stormed off and said I'd make my own plan without her help. I knew exactly what I was going to do. When I got home, I raided my mom's medicine cabinet and found it. Her laxative syrup. I poured a little into a fruity drink I'd bought. Obviously, I'd followed the instructions and only poured a little, I mean, I didn't want to knock Sarah out. I just wanted to give her enough so she'd miss the game. Little did I know how badly this was all going to unfold. When I got to school the next day, I made sure I was early and put it on Sarah's desk. I heard footsteps, though, and almost jumped out of my skin. Luckily, it was just Clara. And when she asked me what I was up to, I just said I'd seen a boy dropping this off on Sarah's desk and had felt jealous, so I'd taken a look. Sarah later took it without hesitation, since receiving gifts from secret admirers wasn't new to her. Well, success. After PE later that day, Sarah drank it. But then, disaster struck. Her friends also wanted a sip, so she passed it around. And to my complete horror, Clara had a sip too. I wanted to jump in and stop them, but I couldn't. In the next class, everyone kept running to the bathroom. It was so awkward. Luckily, Clara only had one bathroom trip, and then she was fine. She thought she'd just eaten something bad. If only she knew the truth. Sarah must have drunk much more than the others, because she still looked pale after several trips. During break, I went over to her and asked if she was okay. Then I suggested she go home and rest, and even offered to help her walk to her car. At that point, I was actually more worried for her than for my plan. But, well, my plan did work anyway. Later that night, Dave texted me saying he couldn't find me at the basketball game. Well, me, meaning Sarah. I told him I wasn't feeling well, and so he said he'd send me a gift the next day to make me feel better. Well, that was the moment Clara came over and confronted me. She busted into my room saying, "I know what you did. Isn't that too much?" Then she said she'd seen the syrup in my backpack. I was stunned. But then I just told her that it was time those mean girls got a taste of their own medicine. But she was furious. She said, "You're ridiculous. Sarah isn't a mean girl. She's so sweet. She's even nice to you. Are you that blinded by jealousy that you'd sink this low to hurt her? You know what? You're the only mean girl around here." At that, she stormed off, leaving me standing there all alone. I froze there, dumbfounded. What just happened? What did I just hear? Was I the mean girl? That couldn't be true, right? Was Clara even my friend? How could she say that to me? She kept calling me catfish, then mean girl. This girl was really too much. But her words kept lingering in my mind. I thought about it. Sarah really had never done me any harm. So why was I being so mean to her? It wasn't right of me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt so guilty. I'd really let things get out of control. Why was I even doing this? It's not like I even really liked Dave. Sure, it felt nice to have a cute guy talking to me, but he was only talking to me because he thought I was Sarah. I didn't know what I was trying to do anymore. The day after, Dave had left a new gift box on the vending machine. I kept looking at it and wasn't sure if I should take it. But then suddenly, a guy noticed it, took it down, and saw it was addressed to Sarah. Then he quickly ran to class and gave it to her. It all happened so quickly, I didn't even have time to react. I ran after him to see what would happen next. Sarah and her friends were all gathered around the box and kept saying, "Dave? Isn't he your crush? That Dave Miller? Wow, girl, congrats! But why did he leave a gift for you?" I could see Sarah was blushing, and that's when I realized she actually liked him. Oh my God, I'd messed everything up! She was so happy, which made me feel even worse. Clara was right. I was the mean girl, not Sarah. I had to act quick before Sarah found Dave and they both discovered the truth. I texted Dave and asked him to meet me at the park in secret. As soon as I arrived, I could see he was there already, excitedly waiting. I hid behind a tree from afar and called him, and then I asked him to let me explain first. I told him I wasn't Sarah, and that I'd been doing this because I was just tired of feeling like a loser. But I didn't expect I'd taken this all too far. "I'm so sorry," I said to him. He was so confused and kind of angry at first. But then, after a while, he said that back in middle school, he'd been a bit of a nobody. So he could understand where I was coming from, but he needed time to process it all. When he was about to hang up, I said, "Wait!" Then ran towards him and said I was the girl on the phone and that I had good news for him. that the real Sarah actually did like him too, and that all he needed to do was go and get her. He looked unsure and said, "You're not lying to me again, are you?" Then I said, "I swear, she's got the biggest crush on you. Please let me make up for this all. I'll help you." He looked so happy, and I felt better knowing I was helping this happy couple get together. They deserved each other. I even helped him choose out the next gift for Sarah. Yep, the actual Sarah this time. And ever since then, I kind of became his wingman. As for Clara, of course, I apologized to her and thanked her for being a good friend and for knocking some sense into me. And now, Sarah and Dave are officially a couple, and I even hang out with them sometimes. In fact, Dave's friend has been hitting on me, so let's see if anything happens there. Maybe I'll finally get a real boyfriend.
Hi, Ken here. I'm a breast specialist doctor. I'm trying not to be shy when I'm telling you this. It may be a bit awkward talking about my career, but because of it, or due to it, my life turns to be a drama. Well, I appreciate how hard it is for my patients to visit me. Let's face it, taking your clothes off in front of a stranger isn't easy for anyone. Yes, trust me, I've seen it all before, and it's no big deal. I'm just doing my job. I first met Gemma in my surgery. She'd found a lump and wanted me to examine it. When I checked it with my hand, this startled her, and her natural reflexes caused her to punch me in the face, and I passed out. I woke up a few minutes later to find both her and a nurse gawping down at me. My nose was still bleeding. I must have looked a right sorry state. She kept on saying sorry, but I reassured her that it was quite all right. And then with her permission, I continued with the examination. I found something, so I carried out a biopsy, and in the end, I had to tell her that she had breast cancer and needed to have a mastectomy. I could see her getting quite upset. I got used to patients' tears as they heard bad news. But this girl was so strong and brave. She just asked me some questions about the surgery and calmly left. Then, to my surprise, she impressed me more day by day. For the next few weeks, she brought me lunch every day. I thought she was worried I might bear a grudge for her punch or something, and this was her way of making it up to me. The food she brought was delicious, and I have to admit, seeing her was the highlight of my day. She was so kind-hearted and strong. What she was going through was horrible, but she never let it get her down. Instead, she walked over to my room with a skip in her step and a smile on her face. Soon, I fell in love with her, and I knew she felt the same way, as our chemistry was obvious. But she was my patient, and I had my career to think about, so I knew I needed to be careful. Still, I couldn't seem to resist her or her cooking. I was busy at the hospital all day, so I never had time to date, while she was a martial arts instructor for kids and only worked in the evenings. So she had a lot of free time. So she cooked lunch for me every day and brought it to the hospital to eat with me. Even after her successful mastectomy, she still showed up with food. That was when I couldn't stop myself from confessing my feelings for her. And she said yes. Sometimes she had to wait many hours until I finished seeing my patients at the surgery. When she was asleep waiting for me, she looked like a little kitten. But gradually, that kitten turned into a tiger. And I soon discovered that this tigress bites. Ouch. Things were complicated talking about my duties at work. My patients are mostly female, and when I see them, I need to, what I have to do. Of course, Gemma also knows this because she's been examined many times already. She always fantasized that I would fall for another girl, one who in her eyes was complete. I tried reassuring her that I loved her and only her. Surgery or not, in my eyes, she was perfect. But regardless of how many times I told her this, she failed to believe me. She had a point that no girl could accept her boyfriend touching other women in their things, and even discussing that with them daily. I told her, normally the human body is a beautiful product of nature, but in the eyes of a doctor like me, it's just the same mass of meat. Would you find a chunk of meat beautiful? Isn't that shivering to think like that? Then she argued, so in your eyes, I'm just some chunk of meat, huh? Ugh. I tried telling her it wasn't like that, but geez, she's stubborn. It took me ages to calm her down. Every day she showed up at the hospital and glared at me as the beautiful young women came in and out of my room. Her actions hadn't gone unnoticed by the nurses, who told me that she was making the patients feel uncomfortable with her scanning eyes and judgmental expressions. I told them it was nothing. She was just going through a hard time, that's all. And please be understanding that it was natural for her to compare herself to other women. As I told them that, I was not sure if I could stay sympathetic for her coming behaviors. That afternoon during a late lunch, Gemma asked me if the 8th girl entering my room was beautiful. Oh my Jesus, the only person I can remember was the one who walked out of the room 5 minutes ago. I only remembered that was the one with the cyst, but I didn't remember her face. Why do you have to think so long? Are you recalling her figure? You just need to say she's not beautiful, right? I muttered out, "Yes, right. Not beautiful at all." She frowned at me. "That means you still remember her. What about her impressed you so much?" I stiffened. What was wrong with women? A week later, when she brought me lunch, she asked me, "Do you and the red dress girl know each other?" As she'd been here at least 3 times in a row already. Every time she dresses very well. Whoever wears a red dress to the hospital? Isn't it normal for patients to come see the doctor regularly? No, it's not normal. I want to see her files. The 3rd person from the bottom up. Come on, you know I'm not allowed to do that. Then you are not allowed to eat either. Geez, this was ridiculous. She wouldn't quit though, so in the end, I gave in and showed her the records. This girl had just had breast augmentation surgery, so that was why she came to be checked so often. Gemma just grinned and said, "I knew it! Those are fake!" I thought this would be the end of the matter, but it turns out it was just the beginning. Gemma bombarded me with questions about the red dress girl, such as did I find her attractive? I told her what I believed she wanted to hear, such as she was the only girl for me, and so on. But curiously, during the following days, she stopped going to the hospital. She just texted me a few messages every day and just disappeared. Maybe I should have chosen to be a specialist in psychology, as I may have been a good doctor, but I had no idea what women were thinking. A month passed, and she didn't show up at the hospital at all. I was so relieved at first, but couldn't stop wondering what my sassy girl was planning to do. Meanwhile, it was strange that the red dress girl popped up more and more, even though her health was completely fine. Then one day she turned up saying she had pain and itching. I scanned and tested her, but couldn't find the cause. "Hey lady, you are healthier than me. If you are not sure, please do a checkup once a month, or I can also refer you to another hospital." "Where's your girlfriend?" she interrupted me. "Sorry?" "She told me to wait and see, but I can't wait anymore." "Where is she?" "Huh? What was going on?" Just then the door opened and in barged Gemma. Oh my God. She looked like a different person. She was dressed so sexy, not cute like before. As a doctor and as her boyfriend, I immediately realized that she'd got breast implants. Before I could speak, a man stepped in and put his hand on her hip. Then he gave a confused look as he looked at the patient and immediately removed his hand from Gemma's hip. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded to know. Gemma stared at the girl and said, "I told you that if you continued to deliberately flirt with my boyfriend, I wouldn't leave it alone." The man, who was the same age as my dad, looked at Gemma. "What flirting?" Then he looked over at the other girl. "Are you cheating on me?" Then the red dress girl grinned at him and said, "Who is the cheater now?" What? They two were a couple or something? But what was my girlfriend doing here? Gemma turned to the man. "She started it first. I have proof. I have taken pictures of the time she approached my boyfriend. If you two get divorced, you will need it. You will not want to divide your property with a wanderer, right?" I shouted out, "What the hell are you doing?" The man looked at Gemma. "You played me? You seduced me just because she flirted with your boyfriend and you wanted revenge?" God, the door was still open and doctors, nurses, and patients came to see this chaos. They just pointed and thought this was a jealous scene. So it transpired that Gemma tried warning the red dress girl off me. And when that didn't work, she tracked down her husband and seduced him. And she even got breast implants for that silly plan. OMG, she was crazy. After that incident, I was severely disciplined for affecting the image of the hospital and was forced to work in a volunteer clinic in Mexico for 6 months without any payment. Yup. Now I'm in Mexico to pay the price of the mistake of... No. What was my fault? I didn't do anything. So the moral of the story is, don't get involved with a patient. however good their cooking is. Trust me, it's so not worth it.
Hey, Haley here again. So, in the last episode, Eric had gone to LA to become a singing sensation, while I was left at home, missing him like crazy. When he told me he was performing his debut stage, I decided to go to LA and surprise him. Only, my plan failed miserably when I showed up at the wrong address. Then his manager, Will, answered the phone and told me Eric was too busy to meet me. Naturally, I felt bummed out. But Anna and Kurt insisted on cheering me up, so they took me to Disneyland. Okay, so I tried to have fun. I really did. But everywhere I looked, I saw lovey-dovey couples. Anna and Kurt seemed to be growing closer. They kept on taking pictures together. As happy as I was for them, this reminded me that Eric wasn't here with me. Then, when I was deep in thought, my phone beeped. I smiled when I saw it was a message from Eric and presumed he was sending me over his address. But instead, he said,
"There are VIP tickets to collect for you. I can't wait to see you backstage after the show. Smiley face, X."
I couldn't believe my eyes. Eric had got us 3 VIP tickets. It was a sold-out show, so it was the coolest thing ever. As soon as I showed the message to my friends, Anna squealed excitedly, but I couldn't help but notice that Kurt didn't look all that thrilled. We got ready and arrived at the show super early. I went to the booth to pick the tickets up. I looked at the tickets excitedly, but what's this? There was nothing on them about being VIP tickets. There must have been a mistake, right? So I asked the lady behind the desk about it. She frowned at me and assured me there was no mistake. Annoyed, I walked off and called Eric, but unsurprisingly, he didn't answer. No doubt he was in rehearsals or something. I was really disappointed because I just wanted to be by his side, to encourage and cheer him on the first time he performed. But now I couldn't. Plus, I was a little nervous his stage fright would return. I explained the mix-up to the others, and Anna was cool about it, and Kurt just rolled his eyes and muttered out, "Figures." I didn't bother asking him what he meant by this. I was already bummed out enough. The show was great, and Eric's performance, well, it was so amazing. He'd come on so much since I'd last heard him sing, and I was so proud of him. As soon as the show ended, I rang Eric again, and this time he picked up. I told him about the tickets, and he seemed confused. He confirmed to me that he asked the manager for 3 VIP tickets for us. Then Eric continued.
"Now I'm joining an after-party. I'll send you the address. Let's meet there."
I replied, "Sure, I'll be there. I miss you." I told Anna and Kurt about the party, but they both said they were tired, so made their way back to the hotel. It's okay, as I grabbed a taxi and went to the party by myself. As soon as I entered, I was overwhelmed by the bustle of the party. I'd only been there a few minutes, and I saw a super famous actor walk past me. This was so cool. I grabbed a glass of wine, stood in the corner of the room, and looked at Eric. He stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by a lot of people toasting glasses. Suddenly, I felt like an outsider. Now Eric was a rising star, and I was still an unknown child. After a while, the crowd thinned out, and then a smiling Eric walked over to me. Oh my God, my heart was beating so fast. Finally, I could meet him. I happily waved at him. But then suddenly, Will strode over and whispered something in his ear before he pulled him away. What? Why did he do that? I didn't even have time to say anything to Eric. An anxious restlessness swirled in my heart, so I secretly followed the two of them. Will pulled Eric over to the end of the hallway and said harshly,
"How dare you bring that girl here? If the press finds out, you can kiss goodbye to your career."
Eric replied,
"She's my girlfriend."
Will interrupted immediately.
"You have to keep this a secret. If your fans know that you have a girlfriend already and that she's some nobody, they will definitely turn their back on you."
After a moment of silence, Eric spoke up.
"Is it you who changed the VIP tickets to regular ones?"
He replied.
"Yeah, that was me. It's for the best. Trust me, you don't want all your efforts down the drain, do you?"
Eric was silent and said nothing. Then Will continued.
"You see, Haley saw your success, so she wanted to approach you. Think about it."
What? What did he just say? I was shocked and angry to hear this. I waited for Eric to defend me, but to my confusion, he didn't say a thing. Is this what Eric thought of me? That I was only using him to ride on his fame? I immediately stepped out and appeared in front of them. They both looked totally shocked, but I looked right at Will with wild eyes and said, "You don't need to worry. I'm out of here right now." Then I turned to Eric. "I honestly believed you had more faith in me. I guess now I know where I stand. We're over. I hope fame's everything you expect it to be." I stormed out of there, somehow managing not to burst into tears until I reached the street. My heart hurt so much when I realized a harsh fact. Popularity was the invisible wall that separated me and Eric. Then suddenly, I heard someone calling my name. I turned back and saw Eric chasing after me, but I carried on walking. He caught up with me and pulled on my hand.
Haley, you misunderstood everything. Let me explain.
I stopped walking and said, "I think I've heard enough. Don't worry, I won't affect your career." Eric quickly interrupted me.
No, don't say that. I'm so sorry. Haley, I promise I won't let Will interfere with our relationship anymore.
He hugged me tightly, and I felt my heart melt. It felt so familiar being in his arms. I missed him so much, and wanted to believe him. My tears kept rolling down my cheeks, but not because of anger. It was tears of love. We stood like that for a long time. Then Eric said,
"Let me take you to a place."
Then he drove me to the Griffith Observatory. And whoa, it was so beautiful. We sat there and watched the stars twinkling. This night had been a roller coaster, but right now, there was nowhere else I'd rather be. So I looked at him and said, if only this moment could last forever. Eric smiled at me, then asked,
"So, how long are you gonna stay here?"
I looked at him sadly and replied, "I have to go back tomorrow." Eric pleaded with me.
"Can you stay for another week? Next week I'm free. I'll show you the LA hotspots. Stay with me. Please?"
Swing Club could cope without me for a week, right? And it would be amazing to spend some quality time with Eric. So I agreed to stay for another week. Anna and Kurt had flights booked for the next day, so they went back. I'm glad I chose to stay, as the next week with Eric by my side was amazing. We went to so many cool places, such as the Getty Center and the Farmers Market. I was so happy to always be with him. But there was one thing that annoyed me. Eric had to wear this wig, oversized hat, and big shades to disguise himself everywhere. But anyway, I knew that was best for him, for his career, and for me. The week whizzed by, and soon my last full day in LA arrived. And although I missed my friends in Swing Club, I felt sad about leaving Eric. Eric was performing at this music festival that day, so he gave me a ticket, and grinning said,
"Here, now I know it's definitely VIP."
This was so sweet of him, so I smiled and thanked him. The festival was huge. I'd never seen so many people before in my life. And then there was the VIP area. Oh my god, I spotted an A-list rapper praying for his performance, and a famous boy band practicing their dance routine. Eric's performance was, as always, outstanding. Afterward, I rushed into the VIP area and into the big tent. Whoa, it was full of so many famous people. I tried finding Eric, then I spotted him in the corner. He was talking to a girl. I walked over to him, and I couldn't believe my eyes. With him was Clara. She's this super famous singer who's been dubbed the new Taylor Swift. I really admired her. She's only 2 years older than me, but she's achieved so much. On seeing me, Eric introduced me to Clara. It turns out she's with the same record company as him, and they were preparing to release a product together. I happily said hi to Clara and eagerly asked her to take a photo with me. I hurriedly took my phone from my bag and was about to hold it up to take a photo, but Clara immediately pushed my hand away and took a step back, then said, no, I'm not free. This surprised me, so I muttered, "Oh, okay." Then she sweetly smiled at Eric as she rubbed his shoulder and said, "Bye, Eric. I'll catch you later." Then completely blanking me, she sashayed away. What just happened? I stood there open-mouthed and feeling confused. Honestly, what is being a famous artist? Was it necessary to deliberately act arrogant to prove herself a star like that?
Hi, I'm Ella. and I'm 17. Have you ever been brave enough to change the things that you were too familiar with? If yes, did you encounter any difficulties? Well, for me, yeah. It's more than just changes. And this is the story of what happened to me last summer. And it's really crazy, so brace yourself. So, I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. When I say small, I mean it. It only had a population of 85 people. There was just one gas station, 2 small parks, 1 grocery store, and oh yeah, only 1 school. Including me, there were only 7 kids in my grade. That's right, 7 people. And my grade was one of the biggest ones. From when I was 5 years old to the time I was 15, I spent most of my time with the same 6 classmates. After being with them for many years, most of them really started to get on my nerves. Well, apart from Rosie. Rosie and I became BFFs in 3rd grade. Some other kids were teasing me about my red hair and told me that I looked like a tomato. But then Rosie appeared by my side and told them to back off. From then on, we became best friends and were pretty much inseparable. My life was good. I felt safe in my little town where everyone knew each other. In a city, there were way too many people for my liking, and too much pressure to be popular. And I didn't want that. I knew a small town life was the life for me. But then, when I was 16, everything changed. On one Saturday afternoon, I was at Rosie's house watching a movie when my parents called me and told me to come home at once. I thought this was kind of weird because my parents didn't usually call me to come home until it was late at night. And right now it was only 4:30 p.m. What did they need me to come home for? I arrived home to find Jake, my brother, crying. I bursted out loud. What happened? What was going on? Seeing me totally in shock, my dad said, Ella, we have some news. What news was bad enough to make my brother, who wasn't the emotional type, cry? Did someone have a serious illness? Had someone died? Oh no. Had my beloved dog Sally died? Then he said, Ella, I've been offered a job in New York City. What? I yelled. And he's taking it. This is an amazing opportunity for us all. And moving out of this town will be good for us. It'll be a great adventure, Mom said. New York? The biggest city in the entire country? No, I couldn't move there. I didn't want a new adventure. I was perfectly happy where we lived now, and I didn't want to leave. But however much I sulked, shouted, or pleaded with my parents to stay, their minds were made up, and we were moving. Telling Rosie was horrible. She got so upset, and I felt awful about it. I didn't want to leave her, but what choice did I have? I spent my last day in town with her. We ate pizza, watched our favorite movies, played our favorite video games, and things like that. When it was time for me to leave, I gave her my unicorn plushie to remember me by. Then we cried into each other's arms and we promised to text each other every single day. So, I left the safety of my little town and moved to the city. Our new house was much smaller than my old one, but at least we could keep Sally. On my first day of school, I was terrified. There were so many people and I didn't know where I was meant to go or what I was meant to do. Luckily, the kids there were actually really nice. This one girl showed me where my locker was, and some other kids let me sit with them at lunchtime. After only a few weeks of living in New York, I started to find my bearings. I even figured out how to navigate the underground. I made some pretty great friends, but this didn't change the fact that Rosie was still my BFF. I texted her every day, and sometimes we spent hours on the phone with each other. A month of city life passed, and I got talking to this boy in my English class called Alex. He had the most amazing blonde hair, and his eyes, they were blue like the sky and the ocean, and a swimming pool, and yeah, if you couldn't tell, I really liked Alex. Not only was he unbelievably cute, but he was also kind and funny. We bonded over our love of video games and dogs, and soon became pretty close. Then one day, he invited me over to his apartment to hang out. Then over a giant pizza and a movie, he told me he liked me and asked me to be his girlfriend. I instantly said yes! I was so excited and couldn't wait to tell Rosie, but she didn't seem all that thrilled about it. For a few months, everything was perfect for me. School life was great, and I had some awesome friends and an amazing boyfriend. Sadly, though, Rosie and I grew further apart. I barely had time to talk to her hours on the phone every night. It was like our timeline became different. She always called when I was busy, and when I texted her back, she wasn't there. I know that she always cared about me, but my busy life just carried me away. I told myself this was okay as things change. People get different friends. Though not as often as before, Rosie and I still chatted whenever we had a chance. One time I told her that I would be going out with Alex at a fancy restaurant the next day. Anytime I mentioned Alex, she seemed not cool with it. But that time she expressed her excitement and asked me a lot about our date. That made me feel so good. When the day came, I went to meet Alex at the restaurant that he had booked for us. I entered and waited for about 20 minutes for him to show. I began to get impatient and asked a waiter if he'd seen a boy with blonde hair and blue eyes come in at all. The waiter told me he had, but he'd left with a tall girl with long brown hair and brown eyes. What? Who was the girl he left with, and why? I thought of everyone I knew who fit that description. I couldn't think of anyone, except for Rosie. But she lived in Pennsylvania. Why would she be here talking to my boyfriend? I decided to call Alex, but he sounded muffled, and I heard a girl talking in the background. It sounded like they were arguing, and then the call ended. This was so weird. What happened? I had no idea what was going on, so I headed home. On my way, I felt like someone was following me. And then I realized that there was one car driving very slowly after me. When I tried stopping, it also stopped. Oh my God. Was it having anything to do with me? I felt terrified and started to run as quick as I could until I reached my house. I turned back and saw that car parked outside my house. I was shaking as I tried to open the door. And as I did, Sally zoomed past me and ran toward the car. I had only seen her act that way whenever Alex came over. She really liked Alex. Wait, Alex? That was it. Alex was in that car. Was it a prank? I ran over to see what the heck was going on. There, sitting in the driver's seat, was Rosie. And to my complete shock, Alex was tied up in the back seat. "Rosie!" I screamed. "What are you doing here in New York with my boyfriend?" Alex screamed, "Help! She told me you were waiting for me in her car, then she kidnapped me." Rosie quickly turned around and looked me right in the face. "Oh, hi, Ella. What are you doing with my boyfriend?" "He's not a good guy for you, Ella. I need you to break up with him now, or else I will drive away so you can never find him ever." "Are you crazy? We will not break up just because you demand me to do that. Now let him go." I walked around to the passenger door to get Alex, but then the car started moving, fast. I ran after the car, but I was too slow. But Sally ran after it too, and she didn't stop. She almost got hit by cars as she ran through traffic until she was out of sight. I was so scared. I was about to call the cops when I saw a police car zoom past me. How did they know about this already? Who called 911? I looked back and saw my mom standing outside with the phone waving at me nervously. She had seen all the commotion and called the cops. Thanks, Mom. There was nothing I could do now except wait. It was awful. I was so anxious. About an hour later, a cop car pulled up to our house. The cop stepped out and opened the back door, and out came Sally. I ran up to the police car and hugged Sally. She was safe. But what about Alex? The officer told me that they'd chased the car for almost 2 miles until they cornered it on a dead-end street. He said that Rosie was very fierce and tried resisting arrest, but they'd taken her to the station. To my relief, Alex was fine, and they dropped him back home. Phew. I just didn't understand it. Rosie was my best friend. Why would she try to seriously harm my boyfriend? I later found out that Rosie was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. It's a disorder that causes people to go through extreme mood swings and do things that are out of character and crazy. Rosie had a lot going on. As well as me not being around anymore, her dad had moved out. I didn't know this as she hadn't told me. Back then, I wasn't talking all that much to her, but I'd never expected that the separation Rosie felt was too much for her. and could lead her to bipolar disorder. I was her only one at that time, so she wanted her to be my only one too. But Alex appeared and made her feel insecure and seriously jealous. It is fortunate there are no serious consequences. I really hope Rosie gets the proper treatment for her disorder. We might not be as close anymore, but in my eyes, she'll always be the girl who was there for me when I was being teased, and I will always regret that I wasn't there to listen to her more when she needed me. I still feel sad about it all, but I'm trying to see the positives. Things with Alex are going great, and I'm happy here. It turns out city life is for me after all. Whether it's in friendship or love, people still need their own space. And sometimes, as sad as it is, people do grow apart. This happens in life. Being overjealous doesn't help mend things. It just pushes the other person further away.
Hi guys, I'm Austin, and I'm a 23-year-old college student. I guess my school years went by pretty smoothly, as I had my best friend Jake by my side. When we're not partying and living large, me and him would work part-time at this local restaurant. The pay was pretty dismal, but it funded some fun nights out at least. My story starts as many do, with a cute girl. And I'm talking Ariana Grande pretty. Me and Jake first spotted her one day in the coffee shop that we always drop by on our way to work. Neither of us could quit staring at her. She must have noticed us too, as instead of leaving, she turned back, smiled in our direction, then walked over to the counter and ordered another drink to go. She was obviously doing this because she wanted to talk to me, so I rushed over there to start a convo. The problem was Jake tagged along too, and offered to pay for her drink. Ugh. She seemed flattered, smiled, then thanked us both. Then I was about to ask her for her number, but she rushed off as she said, "Gotta go, my Uber's here." It was such a bummer. All I knew about her was that she was the hottest girl ever, and her name was Darcy. Well, that was the name written on her takeout cup. Feeling a bit deflated, me and Jake walked back to our table. But as we passed the table she'd been sitting at, we saw a phone. I presumed it was hers, and she left it there, so I lunged for it before Jake could. He looked so annoyed. Ha! Now the chance to see her again is mine. The phone was locked, but I was sure she'd call any minute now. I wanted to wait for her to come back and look for it, but I had to get to work. I kept the phone in the pocket of my apron throughout my shift, just in case she called, and also so Jake wouldn't get his hands on it and try and steal my girl. During our break time, I sat down with Jake and we looked at the phone for a bit. Yeah, I know it was locked, so there wasn't much to see. However, even on the lock screen, we could see there was a picture of a brunette girl. Why would she have another girl as her wallpaper, though? Could this be her girlfriend or something? Nah, I seriously needed to quit overthinking. I'd seen the way she smiled at me. She totally liked me. This probably was just an old picture of her when she had brown hair. Finally, as I was finishing my shift, the phone rang. I cleared my throat, then in my sexiest voice answered with a, "Hey there." Only to my surprise, she started screaming at me, calling me a thief. I tried explaining that she'd got it all wrong, and I'd meet her at the coffee shop to settle things down. She sounded so cranky, and not at all like the mild-mannered girl from earlier. Then again, I would have acted crazy too if I lost my phone. After the shift, me and Jake walked back to the coffee shop, and as we approached the place, I pulled out my phone and called the number earlier to ask where she was waiting. But then I saw a big guy pick up his phone instead. I was terrified, so I shoved Darcy's phone to Jake and told him to go return it. He didn't know anything and excitedly grabbed it and ran over, only to be stopped by that guy in front of the coffee shop. He asked, "Aren't you the one who stole my phone?" Jake was puzzled and looked at me for help, and we just mumbled out that it wasn't, that it was some pretty girl's phone. She left it behind, so we thought we would find some way to give it back to her. Then the man said, "No, it's not any pretty girl's phone. Don't be sly. We've looked at the CCTV and saw what you did. It was a mess. So are you telling me that we couldn't see our dream girl again, but be caught up in this stealing chaos instead? This sucks." Things got even worse when this big guy put Jake in a headlock. Luckily, a woman walked toward him and said, "It's okay, Tim. We can talk this out." Well, he wasn't wrong anyway. I am a pretty girl. I'll take care of it from here. Then she gestured to him to go wait in the car and leave us three alone. She told us her name was Chelsea and that the scary-looking guy was her younger brother. She gave us a chance to explain what happened. Then she told us what was shown on the surveillance cameras. In the end, we realized what actually happened. While we'd been talking to Darcy at the counter, Chelsea and her brother must have come in and sat at the table Darcy had been at. Then they quickly changed their minds and switched tables, but Chelsea left her phone there by mistake. Once this Chelsea girl realized it was all a misunderstanding, she kept on twirling her hair around her finger, and I'm sure I saw her wink at me. Was she flirting with us? I mean, she was kinda cute, but she's surely older than us, like around 30-ish. Then she said, "So how about we go hang out sometime? As I see it, you owe me a coffee at least." Was she being serious? I couldn't go on a date with her. I don't feel comfortable dating someone that much older than me. And what about Darcy? She's all I had in mind right now. I mean, I could always go and tell my brother that you guys really stole my phone, she smirked. Was she joking or being serious? I didn't know, and I wasn't going to chance it. So I spluttered out, "Sure, coffee will be good." We exchanged phone numbers with her. Later, she texted us to set up the times and places. I didn't want to meet her, so on the day of the date, I phoned Jake up and feigned being sick and told him he'd have to go alone. To my surprise, he didn't seem to mind. Instead, he sounded excited about it. Then, after the date, he came straight to my dorm, saying he wanted to check up on me, but I knew it's just an excuse. All he did was go on and on with me about how much fun Chelsea was, and that she was rich and stuff, so it wasn't just a simple coffee date. But she took him to this fancy restaurant too. I didn't expect Jake would be like that. I'm glad he enjoyed it though. Anything so I wouldn't have to go on a date with her. This went on for a while, and soon they seemed pretty serious. Whenever Jake spoke about her, he went all gooey eyes. So my boy was in love. She clearly cared about him too, and made it so he didn't have to work at the restaurant anymore. I was happy for Jake. I truly was. And also relieved I didn't have to date Chelsea. But I also felt down about it all. He was in love while my dream girl was out there somewhere, and I didn't know how to find her. And that's when my luck changed. I was at work carrying the drinks over to a table when, to my surprise, I saw that Darcy was sitting there. I must have been gawping at her as she laughed and said, "Hey, the Coke's mine." Blushing, I passed her the Coke, then said, "I don't know if you remember, but we met a few weeks ago in the coffee shop around the corner." "Sure," she smiled. "It's nice to meet you again, coffee boy." She was so cute and sweet. There's no way I could let her slip through my fingers again. So I checked to make sure my boss wasn't looking. Then I asked Darcy for her number. She wrote it on a napkin and passed it to me on her way out. I was so excited I fist-pumped the air. Through our messages, I discovered she just started an internship around the corner, and she really wanted to impress them so they'd offer her an official job. I was happy as this meant I would get to see her loads. Every time she came into the restaurant, I tried my best to make a move with her without letting my boss notice. One time, I gave her a free dessert, then said, "Something sweet for the sweetest girl I know." Cheesy, I know, but girls love that kind of stuff. There were sparks flying everywhere. I knew she felt it too. I just needed to find the courage to ask her out. Then one day, suddenly Chelsea texted me, asking why I never came to see her. I thought this was odd. So I replied that I thought her and Jake were kind of official now. To my surprise, she replied, "Come on, you still haven't properly made it up to me after stealing my phone. You know the cops wouldn't be too happy to hear that either, right? Or I could just tell my brother." I didn't want to get in trouble with either her giant of a brother or the cops, so yeah, I agreed to go on a date with her. We met at the same coffee shop where this whole phone drama started, as she said it was close to her work. This time, she introduced herself as the marketing manager of some big company. Wow, okay, that's impressive for her age. She's beautiful and successful. Maybe I really have been a bit rude to this respectable woman, so I decided to sit back and hear her out. But the next minute, she was like, "Austin, I've loved you since first sight." She grabbed my hand. "Jake's a sweet guy, but he's not you." What? She didn't even know me. She was crazy. And how could she do this to Jake? Then suddenly a group of people walked into the cafe. She said they were her employees and waved them over, then told them, "Everyone, this is my boyfriend Austin." I glared at her, but I had no choice but to awkwardly greet everyone just to get it over with as quick as possible. But then I saw a familiar face in the crowd. No way.
Hey, it's Vanessa, back with the final part of my story. So, my first love Julian moved to Germany, and due to my insecurities, we lost touch. Then, years later, I saw him at my college campus, measuring my favorite tree to be chopped down. He didn't recognize me, but thanks to him, the tree was saved. He said to me,
"This tree must mean a lot to you, or else you wouldn't have fought so hard to save it. I had a tree like this once," he sighed. "Please continue to protect it."
I felt a pain in my heart. I knew he meant our tree back home. This was all so overwhelming. There I was looking at my first love, but he was oblivious to who I was. And I couldn't tell him because I was terrified that doing so would mean I'd lose him all over again. After that, I didn't see him around campus anymore. Was he living here now? Was he in another city? There were so many questions I wanted to ask him. Then my mom called and told me to come home for the weekend. I arrived there to find her setting out food in the kitchen. On seeing me, she said, "Oh, honey, I have a surprise for you. Julian and his family are back in town, and they're coming over for lunch." What? Oh, no. Why hadn't she told me sooner? I started to panic. What was I going to do now? I rushed to my room and tried to find anything I could use to cover my face. Finally, I found one thing. I heard my mom opening the door for Julian and his family. Then my mom cheerfully shouted, "Vanessa, where are you, sweetie? Come down. Julian is here, and oh my, he's so handsome." But my parents' smile soon disappeared as soon as they saw me coming down the stairs. They literally stood there with their mouths wide open. My mother stuttered, "Vanessa, what in God's name are you wearing?" Yeah, so the only thing I could find to cover my face was a face mask. Worse still, it had a smiling dog face on it. I know I look ridiculous, but at least my lupus was covered. Thinking fast, I muttered, I have a cold and I don't want anyone to catch it." Then I turned and saw Julian and my heart fluttered. He gave me a confused look. He clearly didn't know how to take my accessory. This was so awkward. The last memory he had of me was that I didn't want to video call with him anymore. And that was 5 years ago. Ugh, this sucked. I nodded at him and he nodded back. I caught him looking at me, no doubt because I was wearing that dumb mask. But we didn't actually speak to each other. Luckily, our parents were carrying the conversation. But then, my mom suggested that we should all go out for dinner tomorrow night. Mom, not again! Why didn't she realize that I needed to be pre-warned about these things? Then again, it was so easy for her as she had perfect-looking skin. Luckily, Julian's family were busy tomorrow. Phew! But they suggested having dinner the day after that. Ugh! Dinner was unavoidable, so I had to figure out a way of disguising my face. So, the evening of the dinner, I ran downstairs and my mom glared at me. "Vanessa, what on earth are you wearing? You look like Elton John." So yeah, I was wearing these huge fashion sunglasses. They were the only ones I could find online that I knew would arrive in time. I replied, "This is the new trend now. You're just too old to understand." At the restaurant, Julian and his family gave me the weirdest looks, but I acted like everything was normal and mentioned how good the food was. To be honest, I felt so awkward and just hoped this meal would be over soon. It all got a bit too much, so I went outside to get some fresh air. That's when Julian appeared. At first, he just stood there next to me in silence. It got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore, so I said, "Since when did you come back here?" He replied,
"Since 1 month.
Feeling annoyed, I replied, "Why didn't you call me?"
Ness, you're the one who didn't want to be friends anymore."
"Oh no, you got it all wrong. I had some problems, girl problems. I couldn't tell you."
"You know, I was really lonely in Germany. You were the only friend I had."
His voice sagged. I replied, "I know, it was stupid of me. I'm sorry, but you're back now. Can we be friends again?" He looked at me for a bit, then smiled and said,
"Seriously, how can I be mad at you now? I mean, look at you."
And then we hugged. I finally had my best friend back, but this wasn't enough for me. Seeing him again made me realize I still loved him even after all these years. My face was the problem. I was convinced that on seeing the real me, he'd run for the hills. After that, Julian and I texted each other loads, but then he asked me out on a date. At first, I was super excited, but then the reality of this dawned on me. I put on my prettiest dress, but as I stood in front of the mirror, all I saw were my bright red cheeks. Maybe I should just risk it. Maybe he would understand and still love me? I mean, it was inner beauty that counted, right? But no, I couldn't do it. So I messaged him back saying that I couldn't go out with him, but he was persistent. In the end, I ran out of excuses, so eventually I had to agree. Okay, so now what? I couldn't keep on wearing face masks and sunglasses. Then I had an idea. What about makeup? I knew it would make my skin worse, but this was an emergency. I put some makeup on, but the rashes were still visible, so I put more and more and more and I resembled Billy the Puppet from the Saw movies. Then there was a knock at the door. Oh no, he was here already! Oh well, I hope he likes horror movies. On seeing me, Julian looked kinda shocked, but he tried to act normal. The restaurant we went to was so nice, but every time he looked at me, he had to try his hardest not to laugh, which in turn made me want to laugh too. Awkward. Afterward, we went for a walk through the park when it suddenly began to rain. So we hurried over to our favorite big tree to take cover. Julian found the carving on the tree and said,
Do you remember this? That day I promised you I'd come back for you.
Then he turned to me, pulled me towards him. His face came closer and oh my god, was he going to kiss me? But then he stopped and said,
Oh Ness, your makeup is floating away. I have a tissue. Let me clean your face.
Wait, what? Oh no, not now. I panicked. I didn't know what to do, so I hid my face from Julian and said, Don't look at me. Can you please go? Confused, he asked,
What? You're acting really weird. What's wrong?
Then he turned to look at my face. I pushed him away and said, No, I'm fine. I'm just having a girl problem moment. But Julian kept insisting, so I freaked out and ran into the rain. He ran behind me yelling,
Vanessa, stop!
I kept running, but then I tripped and my face fell into a muddy puddle. Oh, great! My whole face was covered with mud and my knee was bleeding, so I couldn't stand up. Julian had to help me hobble to the nearest drugstore to buy some bandages and some betadine to clean the wound for me. I sat on a bench feeling like a wounded puppy when he took out a tissue and started wiping the mud from my face. At first, I stopped him, but then he gave me a really serious look, so I let him clean my face. Well, that was it. Julian would finally see my face and he would definitely not want to date me anymore. While cleaning my face, he looked surprised. Then he said,
Wait a minute, you're going to college in Florida, right? Didn't I meet you like a few weeks ago on the campus? Why didn't you tell me it was you?
Because I didn't want you to see me like this. I turned my head away. He looked confused, so he asked,
Like what exactly? Ness, you're acting so weird.
What did he mean? Was he trying to make fun of me? So I shouted in anger, It's my face! Don't act like you don't see it. I was afraid that if you saw my face, you wouldn't want to be with me anymore. Julian shook his head and said,
No, Ness, why would I ever do that? To me, you will always be beautiful. Beauty isn't only about having a pretty face. It's about having a pretty mind, a pretty heart, and a pretty soul.
And then he kissed me on the forehead. Oh gosh, I never imagined that it would turn out like this. Julian was indeed the sweetest person ever, and I should have never have doubted him. Well, Julian and I became an official couple. Loving him makes me so happy. He makes me believe in myself and reminds me that regardless of my lupus, I'm still beautiful. And we will soon get married in a few months. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with him, happily ever after. So, as you can see, in the end, Julian was my first and my last love, which means my fairy tale dreams did come true. But let me tell you this, it's not important if you marry your first love or not. It's important that you marry someone who makes you happy and someone who accepts you for who you are. So, when you find someone like that, then hold on to them, whether this is your first or your 21st love.
Hey, it's Haley. In the last part of my story, I moved to LA with Phil, and after a tricky start, we were finally noticed. Now, we're signed to a record label and have a boss, Dean. My dreams were starting to come true. Well, apart from the fact that Dean was making me feel a little uncomfortable, so I made up an excuse not to go to this A-list party with him. I was on my way home when I heard Dean shouting after me. Oh no, what did he want to say to me? This couldn't be good. Could it? I pretended that I hadn't heard him and kept on going. He was so persistent though, and followed after me, continuing to call my name. I ended up turning around and saying, "Dean, what's the matter? If it's not so important now, can we talk later? I really need to get home." I looked down at my watch. He replied, "Wait, Haley, why are you avoiding me?" While I was faltering and didn't know how to answer, he continued, "One minute you're jumping up and down in excitement about the party, but then when Phil said he wasn't going, your mood changed. Is it because you don't want to go with me?" I sputtered in a small voice. "Hey, Haley, are you thinking I have bad thoughts in my mind or something?" He burst out laughing. "Oh no, I'm a happily married man. Come, let's talk." He waved me over to a nearby bench. "You have nothing to worry about. I'm just looking out for you, as I feel like I didn't manage to do that for my sister, Ellen." He gave a thoughtful sigh. "She was a musical genius. Not only was her voice the most powerful one I've ever heard, but she could play multiple instruments. But she didn't tell me about her leukemia. Turns out, she was hiding it for years, as she didn't want us to worry. That was our Ellen, always putting others first." I was stunned and didn't know what to say. I felt so foolish for misunderstanding Dean. There I was, thinking he was being over-familiar, when all he was actually doing was trying to look out for me, because he saw me as a sister. I muttered out, "I'm sorry," while I patted his shoulder to comfort him. Looking up at me, he said, "It's okay. It was a long time ago, and I'm sorry that I made you feel uncomfortable. You have a beautiful voice, and you remind me so much of Ellen. She didn't get a chance to fulfill her dreams. But you can, and I want to help you, as I know that's what Ellen would want me to do." He smiled gently. "So, are you going to come to the party?" he asked. Smiling, I said, "Yes. Only Phil the Fool would want to miss this. This is so exciting." I felt so much better now that my misunderstanding with Dean had been resolved, although I did cringe when I thought about how I'd been toward him. Anyway, I had a party outfit to plan. You wouldn't want to be underdressed at events like this, right? The night after, I wore my favorite dress and arrived outside of the company to meet Dean, feeling both excited and nervous. This would be the first time I got to get in contact with real celebrities. I'm talking A-list singers, probably even Hollywood movie stars, people that you would only see on TV. When we arrived at the main entrance to the party, the gate opened automatically. Wow, the driveway alone was bigger than the street I lived on. Then I spotted the mansion and a whole lot of supercars. "Pretty impressive, huh?" Dean grinned at me. I smiled back. "You could say that." I was about to attend a lavish party in Beverly Hills, in the biggest mansion I'd ever seen. That's a first, for sure. It was like a dream that you never wanted to end. Dean led me around and introduced me to loads of different people, but suddenly I caught sight of a familiar figure. I tried to look carefully. Wait, wasn't that Clara? Speaking of her, well, I've been trying to get her and Eric out of my mind for a long time, which wasn't easy when they were both super famous. I had to see news about them everywhere, whether it's about what they wore today, what's their schedule next week, or when their stupid duet hit the chart. Trust her to be here. Ugh. But wait, if Clara was here, then would Eric be here too? Oh no, I really didn't want to meet him at this time. I was lost in thought when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Startled, I turned around and saw that it was Dean. He handed me this fancy-looking cocktail and asked me if I was okay. That's when Clara appeared in front of us and started air-kissing Dean. He was about to introduce me to Clara when she stopped him. "Oh, is it you, Haley? Now that you're having a go at being a celebrity, you probably don't remember me anymore." She smirked.
"Huh? You two already know each other?"
Dean asked. "Yeah, we know each other very well, right?" Then she winked at me. "But uh-oh, seems like I picked the wrong moment to bother you. So you two..." Realizing what she was insinuating, Dean said,
"Come on now. You've also met Jane, my wife. Don't make fun of that."
She rolled her eyes and said ironically, "Oh, yeah, I forgot. It's just that you two look so loving. Eric never dares to be so intimate with me in public. I'm so jealous." Then she smirked and walked away. Dean told me not to take any notice of what Clara said, as she's known for being shrewd. Even though I was quite annoyed with Clara's rude words, what bothered me most at that time was not her, but Eric. Why did she intentionally mention his name in front of me? While Dean was talking to some big business types, I stepped out onto the balcony to get some fresh air. From there, I could see clearly the iconic Hollywood sign. Then I turned around to look at the bustling room, where all the well-dressed celebrities were laughing and talking. I took a deep breath and thought to myself, "Look at that, Haley. You did it. This was what you've been dreaming of." That's right. I've worked so hard to get here. It's a brand new chapter now, and the ghosts from the past wouldn't be able to hold me down anymore. That encounter with Clara had actually changed my mindset quite a lot, instead of ruining my night. From then onward, I felt like I was uncovering a new source of motivation. I buried myself in work. I worked for my family, my friends, for fans who were always supporting me, and for myself. And then finally came the day when my hard work paid off. That day, Phil and I were going through some demo tracks to pick out one to be our next single, when suddenly, my phone rang. It was Dean. He said that Phil and I had been invited to perform at Blue Moon Festival. Oh my God, this was incredible! It's the famous Blue Moon that I've watched and read about for all my life. I'd get to stand on the same stage my idols had performed on. What could be better than that? I was so excited, I jumped up and down and then hugged Phil. However, my mood dampened when I found out who else was performing there. Eric! It felt like my heart had stopped beating for a few seconds as I stared at the laptop screen, emotionlessly. Phil seemed to realize that there was something wrong. He immediately looked at the lineup and was quiet at first. Then he said,
"Haley, I get it. You know, we don't have to do this festival."
It's true that even though it had been a long time, I still felt a pang of sadness whenever I thought about Eric. However, I couldn't turn this opportunity down. That wouldn't be fair on Phil, or on myself. So I smiled at Phil and said, "It's okay. I wouldn't miss it for the world." D-Day arrived. I was super excited and also terrified that I felt like I was gonna puke, which would have been bad, as I was in a swanky van en route there. My nerves were partly because I was going to perform in front of the largest audience ever, but also because I would have to be in the same place as Eric. I shook my head to shatter that thought and reassured myself that with so many artists, the chance of me having to see him again was very low. After an amazing performance, I felt electric. I'd done it. I was so proud of myself and of Phil. We were the dream team. We were walking backstage when I felt someone pull on my arm. I turned around and saw that it was Eric. Without saying a word, I pushed him away and carried on, but he once again pulled on my arm. Phil turned back, and on seeing what was happening, he immediately intervened.
"Hey, let go of her!"
Eric said,
"I just want to talk to Haley in private."
Phil said sharply,
"Just say it out loud. The two of us are one now. Haley's story is mine too."
Annoyed, Eric replied,
"It's not your place to say that. You're nothing to her. Haley, please, listen to me.
The situation seemed to be growing more and more complicated, and the last thing any of us needed was to cause a scene here. So I told Phil to go to the green room first. Then I turned to Eric, and in a cold voice I said, "Okay, Eric, what do you want?"